Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Straight Talking Leadership with me, Chris Piankowski. I'm joined today by my special guest, Kristi Straw, the trailblazing force behind Unicorn Leader and your captain on this voyage through the tempests of leadership. With a career spanning two electrifying decades, Kristi has not only shattered glass ceilings, but forged a whole new skyscraper of innovative leadership. She's a strategist by mind, a rebel by heart, and a unicorn by spirit. Known for blending compassion with candor, Kristi doesn't just walk the talk, she dances it, leading change with a flair that's as bold and brazen as her leadership style. Hold on to your seats because with Kristi at the helm, you're in for a whirlwind journey of transformation, disruption, and outright leadership revolution. Kristi, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, this is going to be a fun episode. I can tell already. So, one thing that I'd like to do before we get started, the whole purpose of these segments that I call My Journey is to have conversations with interesting, dynamic people and really just share some nuggets and some wisdom about leadership. Before we get into that, though, I always like to do a quick warm up that I call the Mad Minute. The Mad Minute is just a couple questions that have absolutely nothing to do with leadership. It's really just to get the ball rolling, stimulate the gray matter between our ears, and kick us off. Are you ready for the Mad Minute?
I was born ready. Let's go.
Love it. All right. Question number one. You have just won $10 million, tax free $10 million. There are two ways to collect your money. Number one is you receive $1 million a year for 10 years. Number two is you can receive $5 million right now, and the other five has to be donated to your favorite charity or charities. How do you collect your winnings?
Mm. Well, as somebody who grew up in the world of wealth advisory, I would have to run that through a tax estimator. And I would also have to figure out which would leave the longest lasting legacy for the organizations that I want to support. So my answer would be to consult my local financial advisor.
All right. So you would seek out that expert help and then make a decision from there.
100%, Chris.
Okay. Um, Question number two. What is the best gift that you've ever received?
The best gift I've ever received is at one of my former employers. The regional executives got together and presented me with a plaque that held my business cards, and it said, Kristi Straw, a heart-based leader. And to this day, I still have it, and it was the best gift I've probably ever received, and I sobbed uncontrollably for days.
Well, you know what? Those gifts, when people recognize the impact that you've had on them, on the organization, it really speaks to the person that's receiving the gift. So in your case, they knew something about how you made some transformation, how you show up every single day to lead people with empathy and with your heart. So I'm going to guess that that gift was very heartfelt from them. And that's probably one of the reasons that it's so special to you.
100%. It was a manifestation of all that I had been learning and growing from in my learnings along my journey. And so to have that externally validated and recognized through no doing of my own was a pretty pivotal moment for me and told me, "You're on the right track, lady. Keep it up."
Awesome. I love it. So, Christy, let's jump in. Tell us about your first experience leading people and how did that experience go?
My first experience leading people was on the playground when I was young. And, I can still remember and smell the outside and heading to the playground and heading to the monkey bars. And I was to orchestrate a wedding. I was going to orchestrate a playground wedding. And it was my first opportunity to get to lead because it was my wedding and I was finally the one getting playground married. And I was only 2 or 3 minutes into it, and everyone said I was very bossy. That was that was my very first experience leading, and then my pretend husband really didn't want to be my husband anymore because I was bossy, and so I think that it has been a pretty, progressive career from bossy, playground, pretend wife to today.
Interesting. So, you know, you hear and I hear female leaders push back on that term bossy, right? When
Mhm, yes.
so there's this dichotomy that if a little boy is taking the initiative to gather everybody, we've got a goal, we're going to achieve that, it's automatically seen as this little boy has leadership qualities. But
Mhm.
when a girl takes that same initiative, she's seen as bossy. And I really commend the women who want to try to change that outlook because if the roles were reversed, you're looking at leadership qualities. It's not a bossy
Mhm.
quality. But how did you how did that affect you and how did you kind of roll with that to say, "No, I'm a leader. I'm not bossy. I'm a leader."
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I'm the youngest of four children. Grew up
Okay.
in a very small town in Illinois. My very first real job was detasseling corn. And so I think it impacted me and affected my leadership in a way that I too took note of the difference between when these younger boys on the playground were great leaders and motivating people, and then I was perceived and described as bossy. And honestly, the best way to describe what I did about it was I just got bossier because I really thought something needed to change. Either the world needed to change or I was going to be bossy and have a lot of feedback, although I wouldn't have called it that at the time, but a lot of feedback along the way to help me get better at leading people. I always knew that it was something I wanted to do. I just truly wasn't sure based on my bossy intimidating personality, whether or not that was going to be in the cards for me. And so it wasn't really until I was a practicing financial wealth advisor that I realized, hey, this has a lot to do with leadership and being really emotionally intelligent. I wonder if I can build a practice around just being really damn good at leadership and emotional intelligence and leading my clients through a process. Because frankly, I wasn't real into the math of it all. So that was my workaround to having a successful advisory career, was to perfect that EQ and to perfect my ability to relate and connect with clients and prospects, really to make up for a deficit that I had in some extraordinarily insightful financial planning capabilities. That was not where my skill set lied. So I recognized that early on, and I think that's been something that has followed me throughout life. Was just a pivot of, okay, if this isn't where my skill set is, here's where I'm feeling like it is, and here's where external data is validating that it is. Let me go ahead and see how I can move about the obstacle differently.
Nice. So you doubled down.
Hmm.
You were like, "Nope, we're going full bossy on this."
Yes.
And but, there's a word or a couple words that you use there, emotional intelligence. And
Hmm.
I I talk a lot about the importance of emotional intelligence, EQ, from a leadership standpoint.
Hmm.
And one of the things that so back in the day, I'm stubborn by nature. And when I was younger, I was an idiot, and that only compounded, like, my stubbornness. Um, and I always thought that EQ was touchy-feely. I am not a touchy-feely person, and it wasn't until I started to really study what is emotional intelligence, what exactly does that mean, that I really started to make the connections between leadership.
Mhm.
And people, I think a lot of people don't understand or realize that we have this IQ and this EQ. The IQ you're born with. Over the course of your life, your intelligence really doesn't change, right? You acquire more information, more knowledge, but your intelligence, the rate at which you can acquire that knowledge really doesn't change. Like, you're born with that. But EQ is something that you can continuously work on. You can always be better at your emotional intelligence, how you're approaching situations, how you're taking a breath and stepping back as opposed to just being a bull in a china shop. Um, for me, I've got like the whole top of my left arm is my spirit animal, which is a raging bull, because I used to be a bull in a china shop. So there are
I
times
love
that
it.
I
Oh,
will.
that's so relatable. My mom used to call me a bull in the china shop all the time. And
Nice.
you're Chris and I'm Kristi. Oh my gosh, I can't stand it. There's a lot of
Yes.
similarities here.
What so from an EQ standpoint, like, you obviously kind of honed in on that. How does it come across when you are working with other leaders in terms of helping them to identify and develop their EQ and translating the importance of that from a leadership standpoint?
Sure. Well, I suppose more than anything, I always try to start any type of a conversation or an engagement with compassion and understanding, mainly because historically I was not on the receiving end of a lot of that throughout my growing and budding career. Mainly, also, I would give credit to the fact that the introduction of Brene Brown, who's a particular role model of mine, I really gleaned on to her teachings early. And then Radical Candor by Kim Scott was something that
Great
really
book.
helped me kind of, yeah, that really helped me kind of
Yes.
develop my muscle of being more candid and also still being able to lead in an empathetic way. And the biggest struggle that I see, honestly, Chris, is that people believe that these concepts are mutually exclusive, right? Being empathetic and creating a sense of belonging and having a compassionate culture is not mutually exclusive of accountability and amazing results and growth. And scaling revenue. So that's the first struggle that I typically always run into is people believe whether right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. They come into the conversation with a perception of you're going to be really touchy feely. That's not my jam. I'm not interested. I really just want results. And so, what I try to do is meet them where they are because I have lots of data to back up that, a financial advisor who uses emotional quotient can improve their revenue 8 to 12% a year. So, I know that I can meet these people where they are. I can speak money if you'd like to talk in terms of money, of how a higher EQ will help you. I can speak in terms of career development and leadership. I can speak in terms of just networking and relationship management. All of those things we can talk about. So, what I try to do firstly is to meet them where they are, have a compassionate and empathetic lens from which I view them, and see what we do have in common and where we can start with right there. It's probably similar to what you do, would you imagine?
Yes. It's so important to kind of draw out the commonalities. And all right, let's see where we're aligned. Let's see
Mhm.
what common beliefs we have, values, where we look at things the same way, and now we can peel it back and see, all right, how do we view certain things differently, and then let's try to pull it all together. Um, the one thing that you had mentioned too is that there's people see a dichotomy between accountability and, like, being emotionally aware, right? And
Mhm.
because emotional intelligence is so kind of wide and broad,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, any culture that is high performing thrives on accountability. I
Mhm.
don't care if you're a cold fish or you're like the office hugger. If you're part of a culture that is high performing, accountability is part of that regardless, because high performing people not only want to be held accountable, because that's how champions win. But they also want to hold others accountable because they want other people to win, right?
That's right.
It's not a me
Mhm.
versus the world kind of situation. So
I want to point out because you just mentioned such a great point, and it reminds me of a listening that I did with Nick Saban was on a news station a couple weeks ago, and
mhm,
he said mediocre people can't stand exceptional athletes, and exceptional athletes can't stand mediocrity. And when
absolutely.
I think of that, that's exactly right what you just said, which is people want to be accountable and we want to be surrounded with others who are holding themselves to that same standard. Now, that's not to say that we're all going to knock it out of the park every day, but by and large, people also need to separate the idea that being accountable is similar and the same as being a rock star performer. Those are not always one and the same either, right? So
Yes.
there's a lot of nuances here that I think are important to discover and also to remain open minded and curious about when we're kind of talking about an engagement with an organization or an individual.
Yeah, accountability really happens at all different levels of the organization. You can be that kind of rock star face of the company, but if your support people, if the people that are actually making things happen aren't accountable, then
Mhm.
then you don't have much of a face to be the face of, right?
Correct. And my concern really for leaders of the future, because that's really where I like to focus. I'm a futurist by nature. I want to talk to others about future proofing their workplaces and next gen leadership. And a lot of my focus is on the fact that people don't have a problem being accountable. People have a problem being accountable to a moving goalpost. They have a problem being accountable to behaviors and like sales practices or cultural norms that don't support a mission or a purpose that's values aligned. These are all very important things to this next generation and the incoming workforce. And what I'm trying to do, and like you, is to really meet people where they are, break down these misunderstandings or these traditional barriers and talk about how actually with just a little empathy, emotional intelligence, and some situational awareness, we'll all be a lot better off and probably, based on studies, have better results and profit to show for it.
You're right. And I just want to stick on this topic for just another minute, but I think that there's a difference. So I'm a Gen Xer, proud Gen Xer. And for me, it was I wanted to be accountable for my own actions because I didn't want to A, let anyone else down, and
Mhm.
B, I didn't want to be reprimanded. So to me, the notion of accountability was just get your stuff done, do the best that you can do, and make sure that you're fulfilling your promises, right? Be a man of your word, do what you say you're going to do, and then people are going to leave you alone. Like I think that's ultimately the mindset of Gen X is like just leave me alone.
Yes.
I will do what I say I'm going to do. But it is different with, you know, the up and coming generations. I don't think that they have that same mindset because they while they're driven, I see this in my own kids. I see this in younger people that I train jujitsu with. These I don't want to call them kids, but if they're in their 20s, to me, they're a kid. But I see the motivation. I see how they're driven to succeed, but the way that you draw that out of them is different. They still want to be held accountable, but accountability looks way different to them than it did to me, even at that age.
I totally agree with you. Accountability for the next gen workforce is really about one of three things. Daniel Pink talked about it best, right? Mastery, autonomy, purpose. And so
Mhm.
a lot of what I do work around is what is that map to success and how does this next gen workforce feel motivation and which driver is producing the result or not that we're looking for, and if we speak to that driver, whether they're driven by mastery, autonomy, or purpose, we will get to the core of how to motivate this incoming generation. Because to stand at the helm of something and say, this is how we've done it, this is just the way it is, and this is what we're going to keep on doing, is a sure way to not have a business.
That's
And
right.
so I don't know how to be any more direct than that.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that you said a few minutes ago is that you're a futurist by nature and you're really looking at the future of leadership and business. I
Mhm,
want you to say more about that. First, for those who don't know, tell us what a futurist is. And
mhm.
then what are the things that you're kind of forecasting for what that future of leadership looks like?
Sure. A futurist in general can be defined as somebody who's trying to gauge trends and what's going to be coming down the pike in any certain sector. What's going to be happening down the road, and how do we stay ahead of, or prepare for, or create a resilient alternative for future happenings? So, when I look at the future of work, and that's really where I'm focused, I think that the reason I became a future of work expert is primarily because I've hit most milestones 5 or 10 years before most people in my age group. I'm also a Gen Xer. I'm 43. So getting to the C suite at 42, being the president of a couple divisions of a pretty large bank by the age of 39 or 40, I've kind of hit those milestones a little sooner. And what that has uniquely positioned me to do is to be in the trenches and on the front lines, right, with the future of work. And I never wanted a significant separation. It's just not the way I lead. I'm an inspirational leader. And so by nature, we don't want a separation based on title. I
Mhm.
was generally to be found with bankers or with advisors or whoever I happened to be leading at the time. And so that has uniquely positioned me to kind of bridge this gap, right, between old school thinking and leadership and what the younger generation, the future of work, is clamoring for. And so there's all sorts of things that we're seeing happening. The first thing is the future of work isn't interested in a social media policy. They're certainly not interested in a social media policy being instituted or implemented once they've signed on board. And the future of work would view you as an organization who might attempt to do such a thing as just not a good soul, not a good person. And because that doesn't align with their purpose, because they may be driven by purpose in this instance, they don't give two cares whether or not they quit the job the next day and try to figure something else out along the road. And so that's the first difference. This generation and upcoming generations have seen what they perceive to be misbehavior, poor behavior from corporate America.
Mhm.
And they're not down with it, and they're not willing to work with it or for it in any stretch. And as soon as they can, they move to a different organization without much thought for what it might look like on a resume. They're not super worried about that either. As long as they're growing and their skills are becoming enhanced, they're moving forward in their personal career journey. And that's what's important. And so it's interesting that this future of work views, yes, it's a right to work, but I have a right to decide not to work for you too, and I'll be happy to exercise that right without little or any forethought or planning. I'll figure it out. That's the future of work.
Okay. And so there's something that I hear often from people that are, you know, our generation and older. And I think that it's kind of a snap judgment of younger people. And they're like, they see them as lazy, they see them as entitled, they see them as not loyal to the company. Uh, and those things were kind of instilled in, the baby boomers and Gen X to an extent. Like, you're going to be at a company for a while, you're going to kind of take what you get and be happy with it, which, I don't agree with that stuff. And these are conversations that I have with leaders, senior
Mhm.
people,
Yes.
and it's no, you have to look at it through a different lens of you have to lead these people differently.
Mhm.
You don't lead them the way that you were led because their values are different. They are kind of living for experiences
Yes.
and they're looking for opportunities. So if you want to retain them,
Mhm.
these are the things that you have to provide for them. Opportunity, you have to if you're going to offer like an unlimited PTO, you have to understand that for the most part, it's not going to be taken advantage of. But that's that's what this kind of rising generation is like. Hey, I want to pick up and go find an Airbnb somewhere across the country or in a different country for a week or 10 days, and I don't want to have to answer to other people. But as long as you're getting your stuff done, that needs to be cool with you. Like,
Mhm.
what do
And
you
that
say to
is
those
the
things?
Chris, I agree with you that you are perfectly describing it, and it tells me, and all of your listeners clearly already know what a great pulse you have on all things leadership because you're exactly correct. The future of work is saying you no longer get to rely on control mechanisms, which is show up, be here at this time, count this many widgets, get this done. Oh, you have extra time, do more. And you need to be loyal to us because the future of work is saying, well, what the hell loyalty has been displayed really for us, right?
Mhm.
And so I also think, in a lot of people, unpopular opinion, the future of work is being raised by leaders like me. And so I fear for organizations that find me a little like, oh my, she's quite progressive. Oh my. Let's turn the mirror around and do some reflective thinking. And how can we help you get there too? Because the future work has a lot of options and they're not lazy. They're smart and they're agile and they know how to figure it out. They've lived through COVID. They dealt with COVID. They saw how that turned their little lives as middle schoolers and high schoolers upside down. And they have parents like me who have absolutely changed the way that people want to be led and what we expect from employers. I'm no different. I'm the future of work. There's a very significant list of requirements I might have to go to another organization, whether it be in a fractional capacity or otherwise. And that's because of the fact that it's our time. I say our because I like to include myself in this next generation of leading what that looks like.
It it really is our time, and I'm saying that in a broader sense of like Gen X, right? The
Mhm,
baby boomers are retiring in droves, and we're the people that are sitting in that, 40s to early 50s. Like, it is our time. We have kids who are in
mhm.
that. y- My oldest is 18, so he's not in the immediate generation right behind me, but he and I talk, and he enlightens me with the things that he says about work. We get into some deep conversations because he'll draw out some of that like old school thinking of me and
Mhm.
help me to reposition it in a way that like resonates with him. Um and
Well, how helpful and what a growth-oriented thing for you to say, by the way. You just demonstrated what everybody who's in any sort of leadership capacity in corporate America or otherwise has to be able to demonstrate. What you just said is to draw out that conversation and find where we can relate and where's the commonality and how do I need to change my messaging to accomplish something similar or even better, right?
that's right. And that kind of brings us full circle to what we were talking about before of finding common ground with the people that we're working with so that we can all reach those shared goals.
Mhm. 100%.
You know, you have come up in an industry that has been historically male dominated.
Mhm.
What and you've reached the highest levels of that industry at a relatively young age compared to, the grand scheme of things. What would you say helped you to get there to break through multiple barriers in order to make those accomplishments?
Well, thank you. That's very kind to hear your perspective on all of that. I would say the biggest thing that has been a contributing factor to um, the blessings that I've received so far and that I've earned are, vulnerability and being okay with being vulnerable, not leading with an ego. I try really hard to not be married to an idea. I try to be married to an outcome or a benefit for all, right? Every decision, there's somebody it burdens and somebody it benefits. And I really want to make sure that we're having a more holistic view. The other thing that I would say is I have the extreme benefit of being joined by my husband, who's a licensed mental health therapist. So I met Mike when I was 19 years old, and I already disclosed that I'm 43. So do the math. I've
Mhm.
been in a relationship with a practicing mental health therapist for a very long time. That has no doubt informed my leadership style and also informed my emotional resilience, because there's been a lot of times, whether it's my executive coach, who I've had for almost 7 years, or my husband, there's been a need for extreme downloading of negativity or things that have activated me or brought something up from the past as I've kind of grown up in this male dominated environment. All of these things, and keeping my authenticity and my vulnerability and my willingness to self disclose in times where it can help someone else feel seen and heard.
Mhm.
I believe that those are the things that have led me to the places in my career that I've gone, because what I've left is a trail of people who have experienced unconditional acceptance, and my willingness to be vulnerable and share the not so great sides of me and the parts that I too am working on and struggling with. It may surprise people to know I'm more situationally aware than I am um, individually aware, according to a test that I recently took. I score higher knowing how other people are feeling around me than knowing how I'm feeling or being perceived. And so that's something that I continue to work on. And I think just being open to working on these things and asking for help and asking for people to help me find my own blind spots and to improve my ignorance on topics that I'm still learning and growing about, that is probably the reason that I've been able to move through my career in the way that I have.
I love that you say having a willingness to ask for help,
Mhm.
because I think that that really sets leaders apart. We There's this kind of natural mindset that people have that is wrong, by the way, that as a leader you need to know everything.
Mm,
And in reality, you need to know how to harness the power of the people that you're leading. And you
mhm,
need to be willing to accept the fact that you're not the expert. The people that you're leading are the subject matter experts. And for you to ask for help, for any leader to ask for help and show that vulnerability, that just cements the level of trust that your people have in you. It takes the respect that they have for you to another level, because you asking them for help is demonstrating that you respect what they know. And just being able to have those candid conversations of, hey, I as the leader understand what our goals are, but you as the person on the front lines understands how we're going to reach those goals. How do we do it? Kristi,
mhm.
I want your opinion. I want your plan on how we do this. And then as a leader, once they present you with a plan, let them run with it. Like, now I'm here to support you to execute your plan that you're an expert on to help us all reach these goals.
Yeah, no, you described it perfectly. And who wouldn't want to move forward in a work engagement or an environment like that, right? Who wouldn't want to be included? Who wouldn't want to feel a sense of autonomy and to have things delegated to them because they're, continuing to prove themselves? And you can't do any of that, I have found in my experience as a leader, unless you're willing to say, here's where I need help. Here's where you're the expert. My
Mhm.
gosh, why have we not utilized your skills before now? Please forgive us, but let's go.
That's right.
Right? And that is a conversation that's probably the thing that jazzes me most up about being a leader, right? Is providing those opportunities and seeing where I could network or create a collaboration between one person and another in an organization, or one department and another, or even amongst my own friends and peer groups, right? I'm just a connector by nature, and I've always believed that it's relationships to revenue. And so now we have this energized, full of vitality individual who says, oh my gosh, my leader believes I can do this, this, and this. What else can I do? And that's what I've seen more often than not. It's very rare that I've been disappointed, hardly ever, by giving somebody a shot or an opportunity and asking for them to be the genius behind X, Y, or Z.
You're right. And it comes back. I'm seeing a lot of interconnected threads during this conversation because when you give someone ownership, then that takes their level of accountability to a higher level.
Mhm.
They feel more bought in when you let someone else come up with the plan and then execute that plan. They're going to go above and beyond because, like, man, that's my plan. This isn't
Mhm.
the plan that my boss jammed down my throat and I'm doing it kicking and screaming. This is the plan that my leader asked me to develop and now has empowered me to execute. Like, all right, all eyes are on me, time to perform.
Yes, their
And
moment to shine and
that's right.
standing behind and providing opportunities for people to shine, right? That is something that I have found most fascinating throughout the journey of leadership is really there's an endless amount of ways we can provide opportunities for others to shine.
Mhm.
And excitingly, they just continue to grow and to develop their own power of influence. And it's a beautiful thing from start to finish and honestly, a million different studies have been done about the impact on culture and performance and retention, and honestly, just mental health. Winning that mental health challenge in the workforce. This is another great way to go about it. Empower people, inspire their purpose beyond the bottom line. That's the key to winning in leadership next gen.
It is. I couldn't agree with you more. We've been talking a lot about successes, a lot about things that we should be doing right as leaders. But is there a leadership failure or misstep that you've had that kind of sticks out in your mind? Maybe it was like one of the biggest learning moments that you had. I know for me, my failures is where I probably learn the most. But is there something that you could share about a time that didn't go according to plan and what did you learn from it?
Sure. Oh man, I think the first 15 years of my career were leadership missteps. There's so many to pick from. Okay, so yeah, I think one of the biggest leadership blunders, and it's bigger than a misstep. This is big. I was very early on in my career, and it was my very first job in banking, the banking industry properly, and I was to be a branch manager of a bank branch in Kansas City. And I was still very much in my, we'll call sorority girl days and was not prepared for working in a workforce that was comprised of people my parents' age, one gal older than my parents' age, somebody 5 or 10 years my senior with a ton more experience than me, who simply did not want the branch manager role. She wanted to focus more on the operations side, and so that was why there was an opening, but she was incredibly skilled. And I think that might have been the only thing I got right out of that partnership is I've always had a really keen ability to align myself with people way smarter than me. And so shout out to Heather if you're out there. You're still one of the smartest people I know. And I will tell you the best thing that I did was to align myself with her and to start learning what does it look like to be not so loud? What does it look like to be not so sarcastic? What does it look like to be not so snarky? And honestly, I failed miserably. My failure was grand, and I very quickly exited and became a business banker and thought, "Woo, I don't know if leadership's for me. Maybe I'm not mature enough for this. Whatever the case may be, I'm not ready right now." And so, what happened between the time of me stepping away to be a business banker and today was a whole lot of growth. I became a mom. Absolutely, that changes quite a bit of how you look at the world and the world in which you want to create for the future changed around me very quickly. I invested in paid mentorship, which, as you know, is executive coaching. I've mentioned I've had my same coach for nearly 7 years and specifically sought that individual out because of our differences and because of how much ignorance I had around diversity in the workplace. And so those are intentional choices that I made based off of an epic an embarrassing failure at the beginning of my career that I'm truly grateful for because have no doubt, had that not been happening, I wouldn't be sitting here having this chat with you.
It's so important to learn from our failures. And I often talk about it's not a win or lose mentality, it's a win or learn. We
Mhm.
will not win everything in life. Everything does not go according to plan. But as long as you can learn from it when it you need to learn from it when it goes according to plan so that you could be better next time, and when it doesn't go according to plan so that you know what to avoid in order to succeed. But, that mentality really applies to everything in life. And I always say that leadership applies to everything in life. It's the way that you lead yourself, you lead others, the way you show up. It's all leadership, and you just apply it in different ways, right? You just tune the dials to meet the situation.
Totally
So
agree.
what what would you say is your favorite part about leading others?
I think my favorite part is probably like most leaders. It's the light bulb moment of, I can do this. Okay, she really cares. She's actually invested in my success as a person outside of this role that I occupy for a good portion of every week. And it's that light bulb moment because sometimes while they may not make enough progress to remain on my team in the business setting, I always like to keep space open for people to remain on my team in the personal setting. And so I'm very clear about that up front. I want to see you grow personally, professionally, and even better as a blend of both. But if I can't help you grow professionally, I will help you grow personally and I will help you find your next role. So let's get started. I think it's that light bulb moment of people really understanding that there is somebody who's in it for them and in it to see them win the whole dang thing, if that's
Mhm.
what we're doing. That's my favorite part.
I agree with that. In all of my time leading people, it the greatest accomplishments have not been the business victories. It
Hmm.
it has not been the financial growth or anything that I guess is really measurable, right? And
Hmm.
we always talk about in business, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. But from a leadership standpoint, the greatest victories, in my opinion, have been seeing other people that have worked with me achieve things. And it's professional, it's personal, it's seeing the growth of the person is so much more fulfilling than seeing the growth of the business. And I know if you don't have people growing, your business isn't going to grow. But from a human standpoint, I love seeing the personal growth because, hey, I had some kind of an impact on that. I was able
Hmm.
to, influence a little bit of that growth. And, I have people that reach out to me that I worked with 20 years ago. And they've mentioned, "Hey, you helped me overcome this or that." I've also been very purposeful to reach out to people that have mentored me to
Hmm.
say, "I just got a compliment on something that you taught me at the very beginning of my career. But what you taught me stuck with me and it's been foundational. And now this other person is like, wow, you're amazing." Well, it's because of what you did for me. So it really comes kind of full circle.
It really does. And I think the part of that full circle moment that so many of us forget because we're busy, we're leading others, we're doing this, we're doing that, is to reach back and to say, hey, like you just suggested, thanks. You taught me this 15 years ago and I just used it. And holy smokes, that's a skill set though, Chris. That does not come automatically unless someone teaches you that and
Mhm.
models that behavior for you. I say this and it's particularly relevant. My son is a tight end and he's looking for college opportunities. And one thing that we talk about a lot is when you've been to a camp and you've been privy to some pretty exceptional coaching, please make sure you reach back out to so and so at whatever camp and say, hey, this really helped me run my route faster. I was able to shake off the DB or whatever the case may be. And so I tell you that this is something that I'm cultivating within my own three kids. And I always tried to cultivate within leadership dynamics, in the corporate space, because that's how people feel inspired to continue to give and to continue to go above and beyond, because that's what leadership is. You go above and beyond.
That's right. When I was in college, I remember going to this lunch and learn, and it was led by like an organizational psychologist. And the title of it was How to Get Anyone to Do Anything You Want. So to me, right, being a young person studying business, like this back in the day, I don't know how many times I've seen the movie Wall Street, but back in the day, I was like, dude, Gordon Gekko is who I want to be.
He's the
Um,
man.
yeah. So yeah, if I can go spend an hour while I eat lunch and learn how to get anyone to do anything I want, that's an hour well spent. The content of that was really about manners, common sense, and one of the things that I remember is always say thank you, like send a thank you within 24 hours of something, right? That so few people do that, that when you do, you stick out to those people, and it's sincere. Like, you don't do it if you didn't get anything out of it, but genuinely thank someone for the time that they invested in you, because not everyone does that, but it builds up that, social capital or the relationship capital that you have with that person. And it's, you know, knowing people by their first name, knowing back then it was like knowing someone's assistant's name so that when
Mhm.
you came in, you were like, hey, Kristi, I'm here to see Mike. Is Mike available today?
Yeah.
And it's really common sense, but the way that it was marketed sounded awesome to me. And I walked out of there, I'm like, all right, I guess I got some nuggets out of that, but I still use all of those things to this
Yes.
day, and I'm
That's what I was
purposeful about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna ask. I mean, essentially, at a very young age, you learned gratitude was gonna get you to a lot of places, and appreciation would open a ton of doors, and just going the extra little step to do something personal. That's the key differentiator. So it's so funny that you mentioned that all these years later, right? That's something that stuck with you. And for all the people who are super concerned about the future and artificial intelligence and jobs being removed and all those good things, there is a degree of personalization that absolutely cannot take place during human to human interactions. And
Yes.
reaching back and being sure to tell your coach or your mentor, hey, thanks when you taught me how to say this, that made a difference in my presentation I gave today. Those are the ways in which we continue to keep that alive. That's really what we need to dig into. Instead of fearing AI, how do we pivot, work around, and really focus on the skill sets that it cannot remove or replicate easily?
So you touched on Brene Brown.
Yes.
Aside from her, who has been the most influential to you in your leadership journey?
Well, that's a real bummer because she was gonna be my example. Um, so I will say this. This is I'm a contrarian by nature, my thought process. The most influential in my leadership journey has been all of the terrible bosses I've worked for. They have inspired me to be nothing like them. And
Yes.
that has been influential for me, is to take the beautiful parts about them, because they all had them, to take the beautiful parts about them and to separate those from the tragic parts or the unhealed parts or the controlling parts, and figure out how to manage around it and to move and pivot in a different direction so that I could take the best of everybody who's led me. And there's been something great about every single one of them, and hopefully harness all of that into a collective superpower type of leader of sorts.
I love that. because that is so true that when you can identify the ways that people are behaving, leading that are not effective, that are negative, and say that I want to do the complete opposite. I'm not going to emulate that person. I want to do the opposite. I'm going to learn from seeing what's not happening for them. Um, Another conversation that I had with my oldest son. So he got his first job, I think when he was 15, working at Wendy's.
Mhm.
And I would go in, pick him up, and he would just start talking about, you know, Dad, I overhear you talking about leadership stuff. And let me tell you about these are the things that I'm seeing at work. It's like, well, first of all, welcome to the real world because
Yeah.
you're going to find bad managers and bad leaders. And second, all those things that you just told me are great lessons for you not to do as you're growing up and as you find yourself in leadership opportunities. So like put that all in the mental bank of I experienced that, it sucked. I saw the disruption in the workplace and don't do that.
Yes. And what a wonderful thing, though, for him to have you as his guiding star throughout this process. Because unfortunately, a lot of, first time employees, they didn't grow up with parents who may be communication experts or who may play in this world of leadership day in and day out. So they bring what they've seen modeled, they bring their lived experiences to the workplace. And whether organizations like it or not, once this employee or this teammate arrives on our doorstep, it's our turn to groom them and move them in a direction that benefits the whole ecosystem of workplaces and society in general. Which is another thing that's super important for that next gen group of leaders, like you're talking about your son. I have no doubt in my mind he'll be a leader one day. I can tell you the same thing about my three. They think it's so irritating that anytime something comes up or they say something, I stick my little finger up and I say, life lesson. And they promise I should have a whole meme just dedicated to life lesson because everything is leadership. Everything is feelings and emotions and how to regulate that and how to recognize it and then appropriately outlet it. And that is where I have learned the most from leaders I do not want to be like is recognizing the emotion and finding an appropriate outlet of it. And learning that is really when my career started to change.
I know that we're getting close on time. I've got a couple more questions, but this one is regarding outlets.
Mhm.
So we all experience negative things in the workplace, in life, and it's important to have some kind of release valve. So for you, what do you do to kind of shake it off, let it go, like, all right, I'm going to let this one roll. Like what's your outlet?
My outlet is I have extreme wanderlust. My outlet is I thoroughly enjoy adventure and something different that I'm unsure of what the outcome might be. And so, because of what we do, we want to stay creative and relevant, and we're creators and content creators and influencers are in our own right, right? In this world of leadership. I find that too many days in a row of meetings or being on planes or doing a speech about roughly the similar type of thing that we're talking about today I start to become even a little bit cynical because I see so much going not the direction that I would like it to go, that I always take that as a sign. When my creativity wanes, when I start to become a little cynical and frustrated with things not moving at the speed of which I'd prefer, then the outlet is to go get lost. I find a completely new environment. It can be a random trail somewhere in Charlotte, or it can be Antigua, Guatemala. I've done it all. Solo trips are my thing. I have to go get lost and I have to remind myself that I'm capable, and experiencing the thrill and the joy of a new environment for me is really that outlet that allows me to come back refreshed and re-inspired.
I love that. I so I used to travel a lot for work. Um And I still do a bit of traveling, but early on in my career, I was so focused on I'm traveling for business for a reason. I never made it a point to sightsee or anything like that. And then I had this switch. It's like I'm in San Antonio and I'm not working 24/7 while I'm here. So go explore. I'm also a
Mhm.
big explorer. Like, hey, look, I want to see what's around. I have I've got a routine where I go for a walk every single morning. And if I'm in a different city, different whatever, I'm just out going for a walk and I'm exploring,
Yes.
before everyone else is up and getting ready for work. Um, it, I was in Orlando in December, and I also like to find like unique Airbnbs as opposed to a
Mm.
hotel. Like find me something that isn't cookie cutter. So I found this Airbnb that it was a guest house on the back of this property with the main house. And I walked out one morning and there's a dog on the porch of my Airbnb. And I'm like, okay. Um, and this dog belonged to the owners, but he was there every single morning and he went on my walk with me. And it was just the
Oh,
coolest thing. Like
wow.
I would
Yes.
wake up and go for a walk. It was a huge property. And this little guy was just waiting on the porch for me to wake up. And he's like, hey, I guess we're going for a walk today. But it was awesome. Another thing for me, an outlet that I have that I like to be physical. So outside of my office, I've got a punching bag. So,
Mm.
there are times that I might get off a tough call and I'm frustrated. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go beat that thing up for a few minutes.
Do you wanna know a
Um,
secret?
I do
In my
jujitsu.
garage, I
Oh,
have a punching bag.
there you
Yes.
go.
So I go punch a punching bag too. It's right before I walk into my house when I need it. So, oh, isn't that
Yeah.
interesting? You love adventure and punching things and being physical.
Yep. And and I do jujitsu, so I joke that that's my therapy. I choke people 3 or 4 times a week, and it really releases so much, like, pent up frustration.
I believe it. Hey, and that's important. Again, it's recognizing that we remain quite composed in a lot of different situations, and we're constantly figuring out solutions and strategizing and helping others brainstorm. That's so key to, keeping that creativity flowing is that physical outlet, which is great that you have that.
Yeah, it's so important for every leader because we all have a certain amount of pressure that's on our shoulders. So having some kind of outlet is so important. That just for your work life balance and being able to be present for your family and being able to just enjoy life. You can't just let that stuff bottle up inside of you for it to explode. You've got to have a constant pressure release so that you're not volatile.
I agree 100%.
So Kristi, we're coming to the end. I've got one final question for you. What is your leadership philosophy?
My leadership philosophy is pretty simple. I like to think it's pretty humanistic. I certainly always want to be hands on with my team. Absolutely, always emotionally intelligent and driving that relationship through the lens of empathy and belonging. Naturally, accountability and being able to get things done is pretty important. Being relatable, we talked about that earlier. And then transformative. And so it's that transformative piece that in my journey as a consultant and a leader, I've discovered that while many leaders are effective, they're not necessarily transformative. And so that's what
Mhm.
inspired me actually to write a book that will be forthcoming in the next 30 days or so. It's called Unicorn Leader driving innovation and influence in the modern workplace. So it's a guide for those looking to not just lead, but to inspire and create a lasting impact. And one cool feature is it will show you where you fall on the unicorn leader spectrum and talk about different levels of leadership from an unicorn intern all the way to a chief executive unicorn. So, with that being said, there's a lot of different pieces moving through the unicorn leader spectrum. But when I say all of that to share that these have been the tenant and the traits that have helped me grow in my career and are quite focused on the whole person's well being, including mental health and physical and emotional well being in the realm of work. And so all of that is how I would describe my leadership philosophy. I'm a unicorn leader.
And tell us again the title of your book so that when it does come out, people are able to look for it.
Absolutely. It's Unicorn Leader Driving Innovation and Influence in the Modern Workplace. I've got three contributing authors, all three. One of them is my executive coach, and two others are gentlemen that I've worked with periodically throughout my career. And we're really excited to bring something fresh and different.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. So, Kristi, thank you so much for being on the show. Any kind of parting thoughts before we wrap things up?
Yeah, my last thing that I would say is thank you so much for having me. And in the eloquent and timeless words, I always like to say people may not remember what you said or what you did, but people will always remember how you feel. And the beautiful Maya Angelou quoted that, and that's really what's driven my career.
That's awesome. Kristi Straw, where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you do and how to get in touch with you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn at K Straw MBA, Kristi Straw. You can certainly Google me that way. And then also lighthouseleadershipconsultants.com. You can find me there.
All right. Kristi Straw, thank you so much for being on Straight Talking Leadership with me today. Everybody, if you've gotten some nuggets of information out of this episode, and I know that you have, please like it, please share it, please subscribe to the channel. You can see the videos on YouTube. You can listen on audio on all audio platforms, all podcast platforms. So thanks again, Kristi, for being on the show. And like I always say, everyone, see you next time and lead on.